Hello everybody, I'm Mark Donahue, and today I'm going to be talking about how the U.S. compares to the rest of the world concerning COVID-19. So first of all, it's my belief that the media misrepresents data to push their own agendas and to boost their popularity, resulting in higher income for the companies and jobs security for themselves. Reporting on COVID-19 is the latest instance of this. See the run on toilet paper as the perfect example of panic created by the media. Although the data presented may not be false, it can be very misleading. Outside of toilet paper shortages and other interruptions caused by this virus, a primary thing that is often focused on is the number of cases and deaths in the United States compared to that of the rest of the world. Just looking at the numbers provided in the COVID-19 Tableau workbook, we can see that the United States makes up almost 1/3 of all confirmed positive cases. In addition, we can see that the United States makes up 1/4 of all reported COVID-19 deaths. Outside of just being numbers that can be referenced, what do these numbers actually mean? Is the U.S. worse off than any other country in the world? How do we properly compare the numbers from the United States to the numbers of other countries? Are the numbers reported from other countries even accurate? Let's see what the data has to tell us as we analyze it in the hopes to answer these questions. Alright, so first we're going to look at cases per country. As we can see here, the U.S. is the largest block in this picture, making up over 1.3 million cases, where next in line is 250,000 from Spain, or around the same amount from Italy. Alright, so now that we see how many cases we've reported, let's look at cases per million, which is a better representation of how many people are actually sick in each country, because it already makes sense that the more people you have in your country, the more would be sick. Alright, so on this slide we see a vast difference in the size of the U.S. Basically, it shows that although we had the most cases, we don't necessarily have the most per person. This time we're about in 7th place, which, although is not great, it isn't as dark of a picture as the media paints. In this case, we have countries that we mostly don't even hear about in the news concerning COVID-19, Qatar and Luxembourg. Alright, so something else I wanted to look at was regionally, how many cases are there? And if we look on here, it almost looks even between Europe and North America, between the US and Canada, with the amount of cases. And then we have Brazil, Peru, Mexico making up the Latin American countries, coming up in third and kind of growing a lot over the last few weeks. We got the Middle East, North Africa, East Asia, and the Pacific. Then we have South Asia, primarily India and Bangladesh, making up their population, as well as some cases in sub-Saharan Africa, but that's mostly based upon what's been reported. Alright, now that we can see regional cases, let's look at regional deaths. Bam, that's a pretty stark difference here. We went from only a portion of that being Europe and Central Asia to over half for the entire world on here. And of course, US still being the largest one represented. Alright, so this all didn't happen overnight. Let's take a look at how these world cases developed over time. So boom, started about March 15th. This just started taking off, climbing daily. But as we can see, even though the number of confirmed cases skyrocketed pretty much at a 45-degree angle there, the number of deaths kind of rose slowly, which basically indicates the number of tests that are being performed. There's a lot more testing the further we go on with time as tests become available. More test in numbers and then just different kinds of tests to confirm these cases. So this is what the world looked like. Let's take a look at how the US looked. Looks pretty much the same. We may have started a week later as far as our rise, but the angle just about the same, as well as where we see the deaths there at the bottom. All right, so on this chart we compare the proportion of cases coming from each country over time. So at the beginning, China made up the vast majority of cases, going around 80,000 or so. And since then, we can also see their case numbers haven't really grown over the last 2 months. Whereas the US goes from really nothing to almost half of this chart. With that said, this is only the 20 countries with the highest number of cases, arranged by size, up to the top. All right, so as we look at total number of cases, I thought this map would give a better idea of where we're seeing cases at and the number of cases around the world. So we can see the US in that dark maroonish brown color there, and then a lot of Europe in the orange, and most of the rest of the world in yellow, especially in Africa, where there's not been a lot of testing or numbers let out. All right, next, this one has cases per million. So we can see the colors change a little bit. America's not as dark on this map as it was on the other one, and we see some of the countries that have been hardest hit, like Spain, Italy. You can see tiny Qatar down here. And then some countries that just haven't even been represented on here, such as Turkmenistan or North Korea. All right, and then we have deaths per million. Where are these people dying the most at from this? And we can see it's definitely Western Europe, with a stark color difference from really anywhere east or south of Western Europe, with the US and somewhat Canada being the only other countries with orange outside of Europe. All right, so mortality rate, basically of those getting sick, how many are dying as a percentage? So depending on the country, this varies anywhere from 0, granted that's not a true number, as some countries just haven't reported anything. So we're going from near 0 all the way up to 20, with some of the hardest hit places being Yemen, Mauritania, more of the Western European countries, and then we have Nicaragua, which actually is at 23.8%, throwing off the color scale on this map a little bit. All right, so looking at how does this look weekly, because we've noticed the numbers bouncing around different countries in the news. So we can see where the US almost went from no cases around March 8th, March 15th when this thing really started kicking off. And then, boom, about 3 weeks later, we've skyrocketed to the top of the charts of new cases being reported weekly. But there's an overall slowly going down trend here. We'll see how that is now that things are reopening. But we can also see countries such as Russia and Brazil, India, Peru that have an upward trend. So this is indicating the US is getting better while some other countries are getting worse. And then we see a very similar picture when it comes to the amount of people dying each week. Trending downward, several others trending upward, but for the most part, as a planet, most of these are either leveling off or going down, which is great for humanity. All right, so countries with test data. If we're not getting test data from them, we basically can't computate properly how this is affecting the world. So test data is basically telling us how many tests have been performed in these countries. So we have all these ones in red. They haven't released any numbers on how many tests they've performed. And then we have others in darker blue, means more tests per million citizens. So if we look at this, Russia's kind of leading the way here, but very close to the numbers of most of these European countries. And the US with about 26,000 tests per million citizens. All right, so here I want to check out some trends between the cases that we're finding and the number of tests being conducted. So based upon our trend line here, the more testing you're doing, the more cases there are being confirmed. So does that mean more cases equals more people are being tested, or more tests mean more people are being confirmed? It's kind of a egg or chicken kind of scenario, but I believe this basically shows there's a direct correlation between the two. And this down here, I think, is what proves it's just the number of tests being given that tell us how many people are actually sick with coronavirus. All right, and then the number of cases versus deaths. So this is more of a direct result. If you have someone sick, are they going to die? And the US, we fall right in line with the trend line here, whereas other countries are way off, such as Qatar, where they seem to have many more cases, but not as many deaths. Whereas Belgium, not as many cases, but the amount of those cases that result in deaths is much higher. So I think from looking at this, we can see that the US, although our numbers are very high in a lot of areas, they're not necessarily off of what the global average is. So I don't think we are doing terribly bad like the media likes to make it look, but we're not trending as one of the best. I would say this is bad and worrisome, and what is the government doing, but we can also see that most of the rest of the Western world is in the same boat or worse than us. So it's not our medical systems that are failing, as these countries have the best medical systems in the world. It's that we're doing more tests and we're releasing the results of those tests and the cases and the numbers and not keeping them secret, or other countries are just not capable of tracking this because they lack sufficient oversight and governance. And that's what I have for you today. I hope this helped you better understand where we're at in the world and how the US compares. Thank you.